Hi guys, it is Tamra. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about escapism, and this is a topic that a lot of you have wanted to see. Right here, I asked you guys if you would vote on what you thought the next topic should be in category C of all the topics that I'm going to be covering over the next few weeks, and you chose escapism. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. We're going to define it a little bit today. I'm going to talk a little bit about it in a detailed fashion. And then we're going to go ahead and end our video. So let's go ahead and jump in. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For all of you who are subscribed and participating, thank you so much. And for those who are new, I encourage you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button right over here so that you can stick around with us and be a part of our growing and validating community. And in case you don't know who I am, let me go ahead and briefly introduce myself. My name is Tamra, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist, but I'm also licensed in mental health. And I specialize, although I specialize in treating adults as well with trauma and childhood trauma, I also specialize specifically in dealing with children, teens, and families. When we think about the word escapism, I want you to kind of think of basically an attempt to minimize what it is that you don't want to deal with or that you can't deal with. And escapism really is a negative term. When you're referring to, activities that are used to kind of numb trauma, numb depression, numb anxiety, escapism is just that. It's that catch-all term where, it could be negative or positive, but I personally tend to lean more towards the negative aspects of what this term means, because most people who want to escape something, they will do whatever it takes to escape it. And sometimes that could mean really risky and really negative behaviors, So I want you to kind of think of the term escapism in terms of I am doing something to rectify a situation, a symptom, a thought process, a series of behaviors, but I'm not doing it in a positive way. I'm doing it in a little bit of a negative way, okay? Now, I also want you, as you watch this video, to kind of go within yourself and question yourself to really see if this is something that you do on a typical basis. Do you do this to try to avoid any kind of childhood trauma that you may have had that has stayed with you throughout your development? Now you're an adult and you realize that your relationships aren't working, your opportunities are not, big, and they're not readily available to you. Your ability to function in daily life is minimized or limited, right? So whatever it is that you're going through, throughout your adulthood or have gone through, I want you to kind of look within as we go through the video and ask yourself, is this something that I tend to do that has severely disrupted my healthy process as an adult? Okay, so I'm going to go through this utilizing categories. If you can kind of catch the drift, guys, I love categories because I think it's a good way to educate. It's a good way to commit it to memory as well. So we're going to start with the first category. And the first category of escapism that I have seen and research has focused on is psychological escapism. Psychological escapism could really be seen as something that you are doing unconsciously. It's not necessarily an intentional thing. It's something that sometimes can creep up on you when you least expect it. And an example of this would be daydreaming, dissociating, kind of going back over maybe childhood development in your mind, or going back over a specific memory or an incident, going back in your mind to start picking and pulling apart your relationships from the past, right? That's kind of like an automatic psychological escapism. You may just be doing something at work, you may be talking to somebody, and all of a sudden you begin to daydream and you begin to think about your previous relationships and a previous experience, and you may even begin to dissociate, which is kind of pulling away from reality unintentionally. It's something that kind of happens to you because of trauma or because of your emotions at the time. You can get a little bit overwhelmed, and so your brain kind of reacts to that, and instead of it shutting shutting down completely. It just kind of detaches from reality. I talk a lot about dissociation right up here in this video, so I encourage you after this video to go ahead and give that a watch, because you might find it really helpful. So daydreaming, dissociating, sometimes even having imaginary friends can also be a psychological way that you're trying to escape, okay? Another way that you may be trying to psychologically escape would be listening to music, drawing, doing art, and even playing video games. If you think about kids or teenagers or men, grown adult men who play video games, I'm sure you've seen them make noises, or sometimes kids will jump up and down, or they're on their tippy toes playing their game. I've also seen kids like spin around and play their game. They're like in their own zone, their own mental world. A grown adult man may just be really like aggressive with the game and just like really staring at the game and just in it, That's kind of like a psychological escapism, because everything else gets pushed to the edge. And for that moment, that video game is that centerpiece, okay? Art can do the same thing. Music can do the same, depending on what kind of music you're listening to. Sometimes rock, hard metal, heavy metal, sometimes jazz or cafe-like music can really put you in a mental zone where you're starting to push everything out in your world to the edge. So that's another way. Another way would be counseling and psychotherapy. There are some people who come into my office, they sit on my couch and sometimes lay on my couch, especially adolescents, and they just start talking, and they do what's called free association. Here we go right here, free association. And it's kind of like this out-of-body experience for them, where they just talk about all their problems and they're really not here in the present moment, okay? I'm trying to think of another one, guys. Fantasy and pretend play is another one. That's another way to kind of psychologically escape from your environment. Okay, let's get to the next one. The next one is behavioral escapism. Behavioral escapism could be things like dance and exercise and bodybuilding and fighting, boxing, all of that kind of stuff. Anything that's physical that can kind of increase your endorphins, increase your heart rate, give you a sense of mastery over something, and then kind of like help your mind to zone out from your reality. Okay, the next thing, guys, would be opposition and defiance. Adolescents do this a lot, and they're more willing to do that, most adolescents and kids, than actually break down and tell you what's going on with them. The next thing that you might notice as a form of escapism, and this is an unhealthy form, would be domestic violence. Some people really do take out their anger and their negative thought process on their spouse, and sometimes they take out their energy and their physical nervousness on their spouse. And that can sometimes lead to domestic violence. I've seen cases where people have come into my office and they've talked about their domestic violence relationships. And they said, right after the incident, it seemed like that person just calmed down. It's like they had to get it out first, and then they could calm down and resume to a normal place. And that's kind of frightening. It's kind of disturbing, but that's what happens sometimes. It's a form of behavioral escapism. Sometimes frequent sleep. Sometimes it's really easy to just go to bed or take a nap or sleep all day. It's a form of escapism. You get into your dream world. Sometimes your dream world is more positive than anything else. And so it's better to sleep for some people. That's why people who are depressed sleep a lot as well. It's a form of escapism, but it's also a way to kind of heal the mind. So it could be a positive form of escapism, but for the most part, it's negative. And again, the other piece of this is isolation, and withdrawal. Those could be negative forms of escapism, because you're not inviting into your environment people who could support you, people who could love you, people who could guide you. You're kind of pushing them to the edge again of your reality so that you can kind of embrace and create a foundation with withdrawal and isolation. It's kind of like a protective mechanism, but it's a negative one. And the next form of escapism would be physiological. Now, physiological escapism is really confusing for most of my clients. And I'm sure you're like, what's physiological escapism? If you had to define it, how would you even define that? Before I started doing trauma-based counseling, when I heard of physiological escapism, I was like, what? What does that mean? So I'm going to highlight a couple of things that you may not have ever thought of in terms of physiological escapism. Okay, so the first thing that I've noticed would be shopping or over shopping. And the other one would be overspending. Now, I guess we're getting into the realm of addiction. That's a physiological thing, right? Drug addiction, sex addiction, shopping addiction, love addiction, right? Any of those things have a physiological impact on the body and on the brain. So when you overspend or you overshop, what you're doing is catering to your emotions and your endorphins, right? So anytime you get a boost in your emotions, in your energy level, your endorphins has something to do with that. So you hit the button on your computer and buy a new television. You go to the grocery store and you shop around and you pick up everything you see in the store because you just got to have it, right? You shop at QVC, usually for older people. So we're talking like 50, 60, 70s and up. They usually like to go on television, click the remote onto QVC, and they just order everything. Diamond earrings they don't need, necklaces they don't need, right? Clothing they don't need, electronics they don't need, and usually this stuff goes into a closet, in a den, in another room, in the basement. Sometimes these things aren't even opened, sometimes they're just like given away to other people, neighbors, friends, family, and other times they become Christmas gifts for some people, So shopping addiction, and overspending, that has a physiological effect on you as well. Now, the other forms of addiction, like sex addiction, love addiction, alcohol addiction, those things are also having a physiological impact on you as well. And they're serving a purpose on the inside of you. And because of the purpose that they serve, it has a way of influencing you physiologically, right? Whenever you engage in that addiction or that behavior or that action, or you go into this realm over here where you get stimulation, you're actually again increasing endorphins, emotions, and feel-good chemicals that kind of reinforces you doing it again, and so it becomes an addiction. And this again is physiological escapism. You do it to get that escapism that you want, which is that physiological feeling of feeling good and valued and of value and wonderful and relaxed and calm and in control of your world, right? Overspending and over shopping is a really good way to feel in control of your world, because just for that brief second, you may feel like you have everything that you need. You have the money you need, you have the ability to spend it, you have the credit card in your wallet, it's in your name, you're going to go use it. You may also feel like I have control over how much I spend, what I spend on, and that's all I need to be concerned about. I don't need to be concerned that over here I have a whole smorgasbord of childhood trauma that I need to delve through. I don't need to be concerned with the deep depression, that I've been trying to manage on my own. I don't have to deal with the suicidal thoughts that I've been having relentlessly for the past couple of months. I can just go to Bed Bath & Beyond, or what's another store a lot of people like to shop at? Target, and spend. And then once it occurs to me that I've overspent, I'll get depressed, I'll get anxious, and I'll shut down. This can also happen with drug abuse and alcohol abuse. I'll drink until I can't drink anymore. And then when I realize that I've gone overboard, then I'm going to get depressed. I'm going to get suicidal again. I'm going to get really anxious. I'm going to feel really helpless. So physiological escapism really is a temporary escapism. It's a Band-Aid until the bill comes in. Now, I've also heard some people say that they are addicted to love. Really what I think is going on here is codependency. So you're really dependent on somebody else to kind of make you feel good. I'm sorry guys about the sun, by the way. I can kind of see that on my video camera when I move. I'm in the sun. So I'm sorry about those weird lines. But, you can kind of get really attached to the codependency in your relationship, to the feel-good emotions and chemicals that are going all through your body when you're with that person that you like so much or you love. And so that can become an addiction, Sex addiction is a huge thing. I'm not experienced in that area of expertise whatsoever, so I won't go into that. But, you get kind of attached to the high that you get when the act is over. You get attached to the process of it. You get attached to that heightened emotional place that you're in prior to it, and, you kind of get attached to that period when you finally come down after the act, and so that could be a real bad place to be in. as you can probably imagine, because you're going to seek for whatever sexual relationship you can get just to experience that addiction. Okay. And I've also learned too over time in my career that, sometimes you can get addicted to the stress response. It's that fight or flight mode that I talk about right up here in this video. Go ahead and check that out so you can learn a little bit more about that. But you can kind of get attached to that. Your brain kind of, getting panicky and then calming down after you're away from whatever your brain thinks is a threat. That process increases endorphins and emotions, and then when it's over, it goes back down again. It's the rise and the fall of those emotions and chemicals in your body that you can get addicted to. So, escapism is pretty interesting. I'm going to come back in the next video, and we're going to talk about healthy forms of escapism and why they're healthy. But I think that this was interesting and helpful to start off with, guys. Thank you so much for voting in the poll about this video, because I think there's a lot of you who could benefit, and a lot of you have emailed me about the very topic of escapism, even though maybe while you were emailing me or contacting me, you didn't know it, but you're actually saying, hey, help me over here because I'm stuck in escapism and in negative escapism. Okay, so I want to point that out as well, that there's a negative form and there's a positive form. Next video, we'll talk about the positive form. This video, we really zoned in on the negative. So thank you so much for being with me today, guys. In this video, I encourage you to give it a thumbs up and go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to stick around with us. Again, thank you for voting. Here's a copy of the poll here. You guys did a really good job voting. Come Sunday, we're going to talk about the positive forms of escapism, and then I'll let you guys vote on the next subject. So I'll see you then.